settling in for a long journey. Hey guys, and welcome back to our quiet corner of history. As the day winds down and the world outside begins to hush, there's a unique comfort, isn't there, in simply settling in. Maybe you're nestled under your favorite blanket, the air just so, with the gentle hum of your home a soft backdrop. It's in these tranquil moments that our minds often wander, drifting away from the immediate into the vast, quiet expanse of the past. Have you ever found yourself considering, as you lie there in the stillness, just how much of what we think we understand about history might actually be, well, a little bit incomplete, or perhaps even misunderstood? When we conjure images of ancient power, our minds often go straight to grand, unyielding stone cities, colossal monuments etched into the landscape, or sprawling empires with rigid, visible boundaries. We picture the Romans, the Egyptians, the Han Chinese, all leaving behind unmistakable imprints, tangible proof of their existence for us to explore centuries later. But what if, just for a moment, we imagine something different? What if one of the most significant, far reaching, and surprisingly sophisticated powers of the ancient world was mobile, an entity that didn't primarily build its might upon towering walls and paved roads, but on the whisper of wind across endless grasslands, the thud of hooves on distant horizons, and a legacy that some still debate even existed in the first place? That's a curious thought, isn't it? Tonight, as you drift into comfort, we're going to explore the quiet, compelling mystery of the Xiongnu Empire, a name that might sound unfamiliar, almost like a forgotten echo, but one that shaped the ancient world in profound ways. Did they truly constitute an empire, with all the complexity and power that word implies, or were they something else entirely? We'll gently unravel the threads of this historical debate, exploring their existence, their sophisticated structures, and their surprisingly unboring daily lives. And as we embark on this quiet journey together, if you find a little peace in these ancient whispers, a gentle tap on that like button, or a quiet share with a friend who also seeks restful knowledge, would truly help these stories find their way to more curious minds. So, settle deeper, close your eyes if you wish, and let's journey back to a time when the vast, rolling steps held secrets of power and perseverance. Whispers from the steppe, the world before the Xiongnu. They imagine for a moment, stretching out before you, not city streets or familiar country lanes, but a boundless, undulating sea of grass. This was the steppe, a landscape so immense it seemed to swallow the sky, where the horizon was a distant, hazy whisper in every direction. Before the Shanguma forged their empire, this was home to countless disparate tribes, each living a life deeply entwined with the rhythms of the land, the movement of animals, and the unceasing dialogue of the elements. The very air itself held a story here. It carried the complex smell of dry grass, sun-baked earth, and the distant, subtle musk of herds grazing far away. Sometimes, after a sudden summer rain, the air would fill with the rich, damp scent of wet soil and growing plants, a brief, earthy perfume before the sun quickly reclaimed its domain. In the deeper seasons, particularly as winter loomed, the air would grow sharper, carrying the biting sting of cold, a subtle hint of frost, even in the afternoon sun, reminding every living thing of the harsher times ahead. This was a world where smells weren't just pleasant or unpleasant, they were warnings, promises, and constant companions. And the sounds? Oh, the sounds of the steppe were deceptively simple, yet profoundly pervasive. Most dominant was the wind, a constant, restless presence. It whispered secrets through the tall grass in summer, creating a soft, rustling symphony that could lull you into a trance. In winter, it would howl, a mournful, insistent lament that seemed to rattle the very bones of the earth, reminding you of your smallness against its power. Beyond the wind, you'd hear the soft, rhythmic thud of countless hooves as herds moved slowly across the land, the occasional bleat of a sheep, the lowing of cattle, or the snort of a horse. Sometimes a distant bird cry, sharp and clear, would cut through the vast silence, only to be swallowed once more by the immensity of the open plains. Life here was a perpetual motion, a dance with the seasons and the needs of the animals that sustained them. These early nomadic peoples weren't tied to one patch of land, but to the ever shifting cycle of grazing, water, and climate. Every sunrise brought the familiar, repetitive chores, milking the mares, checking on the young lambs, dismantling the simple, yet ingenious, yurts that served as their homes. The felt walls would come down, the wooden lattice frames would fold, all packed carefully onto carts or the backs of sturdy horses. You'd feel the rough texture of the felt as you rolled it, the faint smell of smoke and stale air clinging to it, a constant reminder of the previous night's warmth. Imagine the sheer physical sensation of life in constant transit. Days spent on horseback, the rhythmic sway beneath you, the constant shifting of your weight to match the horse's gait. Your skin would feel the grit of fine dust carried on the breeze, settling on your face, in your hair, clinging to the wool of your simple clothing. After hours, or even days, of riding, your muscles would ache in a deep, persistent way, a testament to the endurance required just to move from one grazing ground. The soles of your feet, even in soft boots, would feel the subtle vibrations of the earth through the stirrups, a constant connection to the vastness beneath you. The diet was simple, primarily derived from their herds. Boiled meat, often tough and gamey, would be the main staple, its savory aroma mingling with the smoke from the central fire pit within the yurt. You'd taste the slight saltiness, the richness of animal fat, and the earthy flavor of herbs if they were lucky enough to find them. Fermented mare's milk, or kumis, provided essential liquid and nutrition. Its tangy, slightly alcoholic bite or refreshing counterpoint to the meat. There were few fresh vegetables or fruits for much of the year, meaning a constant, subtle yearning for something crisp and sweet, a longing that was rarely sated. The preparation was rudimentary, focused on efficiency and preservation, ensuring survival rather than culinary delight. Their homes, the yurts, were marvels of practical engineering. Made from felt stretched over a collapsible wooden frame, they were surprisingly resilient against the elements. Step inside, and the air would immediately feel different. A faint, complex smell would greet you, chimney soot from the central fire, the deep perfume, earthy scent of damp wool, felt that formed the walls, mingled with the lingering aroma of cooking meat and the subtle, unavoidable scent of human presence and dried animal dung used as fuel. You might hear the constant, gentle flapping of the felt against the frame as the wind pressed against it, or the soft creak of the wooden lattice almost like a living thing breathing around you. Even with the fire burning, the biting sting of cold would often seep in, especially in the deeper parts of winter, settling around your feet as you slept on simple mats made of furs or woven grasses, the cold earth a persistent presence beneath you. This was a life devoid of modern comforts, of conveniences we now take for granted. There was no running water, no sophisticated sanitation beyond the basics of the open land. Communication was by word of mouth or by messenger on horseback, a journey of days or weeks. Every tool was simple, functional, made from what was at hand: bone, wood, rudimentary metal. The constant battle against nature's whims, against the harshness of winter and the scorching heat of summer, against hunger and the omnipresent threat of sickness, demanded a quiet, enduring patience. It was a profound cycle of living, learning, and adapting, a way of life that had persisted for centuries, shaping these tribes into resilient survivors of the vast, beautiful, yet unforgiving steppe. The Great Unification, Madu Chanyu and the birth of an empire. From the swirling dust of those vast grasslands, a new kind of power began to emerge, not from the slow accumulation of generations, but from a singular, decisive force. A man known as Madu Chenyu. His ascent was forged in the harshest of fires, a tale that speaks less of grand ceremony and more of stark, unforgiving necessity. Modu's journey to becoming the supreme leader, the Chen Yu, was rooted in a profound betrayal, a cold calculation against his own father, Tumyi. Imagine the tension, the quiet fear that must have permeated his camp, the subtle shifts in loyalty as he meticulously plotted his rise. There was no grand throne room, no ancient palace for such a coup, just the chilling effectiveness of a mobile power, swiftly moving to secure its destiny. Madu consolidated his position through a series of ruthless yet strategically brilliant moves. His most infamous, and perhaps most effective, tactic involved the legendary whistling arrow. Picture this: you are a Sangru warrior, riding across the steppe alongside your comrades. The only sounds the steady thud of hooves and the occasional jingle of your horse's tack. Suddenly, a unique, high-pitched whistle cuts through the air, growing louder, sharper, as an arrow flies past you. This was Modu's signature, and its meaning was absolute. Wherever his whistling arrow struck, every single warrior under his command was expected to shoot their own arrow with lethal intent. The first targets for this grim loyalty test were sometimes his own beloved horses, then his favorite concubines, and finally, horrifyingly, his very own father, Tuman, during a hunting expedition. The sound of that whistling arrow piercing the silence of the hunt, followed by the immediate, unwavering volley of arrows from his loyal followers, must have been a terrifying symphony of absolute power. Left no room for doubt, no space for dissent. This was not just a military command, it was a psychological weapon, ensuring that every warrior knew that their loyalty to Modu was paramount, above even family, above their own instincts. The very air would seem to crackle with this unspoken understanding, the persistent scent of horse and dust, now tinged with a subtle, pervasive undertone of dread and absolute obedience. Once his internal power was absolute, Modu turned his attention outward to the disparate tribes that dotted the vast steppe. The process of unification was a daunting logistical challenge, far removed from the tidy lines drawn on maps in settled empires. How do you bring together independent minded nomadic chieftains, each with their own herds, their own grazing grounds, and their own proud traditions under a single banner. It wasn't about building cities and extending roads. It was about commanding allegiance through a terrifying blend of swift, overwhelming force and cunning diplomacy. Motto's newly organized armies, structured by the decimal principle into units of 10, 100, 1,000, and 10,000, moved with a speed and cohesion previously unseen on the steppe. Imagine the collective sound of thousands of hooves, not just a scattered thud, but a low, rolling thunder that seemed to grow from the very ground beneath you, signaling the approach of an unstoppable force. The subtle creak of countless saddles, the soft jingle of horse tack, and the quiet, yet firm, calls of commanders echoed across the vast plains. The air would become thick with the smell of horse sweat, leather, and the pervasive, fine dust that rose in billowing clouds with every step, coating everything in a fine, gritty layer. From a distance, such an army might have appeared as a dark, moving storm cloud on the horizon, a truly formidable sight. Madu swiftly defeated powerful steppe rivals like the Donghu to the east and the Yuezhi to the west. For these other nomadic groups, the shift must have been abrupt and terrifying. One day, they were independent, moving freely. The next, a disciplined, unified Xiongnu force would descend, overwhelming their defenses with a speed that left no time for preparation or escape. The feeling of panic must have spread through their camps as the enemy appeared as if from nowhere, a dark wave on the sunlit plains. With each conquest, Madu solidified his control, bringing more territory, more herds, and more people under his growing authority. This was the practical expansion of an empire, driven by mobility and military prowess, not by the slow extension of bureaucratic reach. The ripples of this new power soon reached beyond the steppe, all the way to the settled lands of the Han dynasty in China. For centuries, China had viewed the nomadic peoples to its north as a persistent, yet largely disorganized, nuisance. But with Madu, something fundamentally changed. The Xiongnu began to appear not as scattered raiders, but as a unified, strategic force capable of large scale, coordinated incursions that struck deep into Han territory. Imagine a Hun border garrison, perhaps a small fortified village near the edge of the Great Wall. The guards on duty would scan the distant, unchanging horizon, the smell of dry earth and watchfire smoke a constant presence. Suddenly, a faint plume of dust would appear, barely perceptible at first, then growing steadily, relentlessly. It wasn't just a few dozen horsemen now, but hundreds, then thousands, a dark, silent wave of horsemen moving with a disciplined speed that was utterly alien to settled armies. The initial skirmishes quickly revealed the Xiongnu's new strength, their ability to strike hard, acquire resources, and vanish back into the vastness of the steppe. The Han realized they were no longer dealing with mere tribal confederacies, but a formidable, unified power, an empire in its own right, one that demanded respect and eventual tribute. Mahdi's vision was not of grand palaces, for he ruled from a central felt yurt that could be moved with his people. His power wasn't in stone or static institutions, but in his absolute command over vast mobile forces, his ability to gather and deploy them with devastating speed. This was a new kind of imperial might, one uniquely adapted to the challenges and opportunities of the steppe. and it laid the foundation for centuries of complex interactions between the nomadic and the settled worlds. The imperial blueprint, structures and society of the Xiongnu. Beneath the Chaiyu, the Xiongnu displayed a surprisingly complex hierarchy, moving beyond a simple tribal chiefdom. There were left and right wise kings, typically close relatives of the Chaiyu, who oversaw vast sections of the empire. These were not just figureheads, they were administrators, military commanders, and conduits of the Chaiyu's will across immense distances. While Chinese historians, with their inherent bias towards their own highly centralized bureaucratic systems, often oversimplified the Xiongnu's internal workings. Their own records do mention these lesser kings, hinting at a multi-tiered organization far more sophisticated than a mere collection of loosely allied tribes. At the very apex of this sprawling Xiongnu entity sat the Chanyu, the supreme chieftain. His authority was immense, extending over countless tribes scattered across the vast inner Asian landscape. Yet, unlike the grand, unmoving capitals of sedentary empires, the Chanyu's court was mobile, the heart of the empire residing within a large, central yurt. Imagine stepping inside this pivotal dwelling, the air thick with the scent of felt, smoke from the central hearth, perhaps the lingering aroma of dried meat and herbal infusions. The furnishings would be simple, utilitarian, thick felt rugs on the ground, low wooden tables, storage chests of cured leather. Yet, within these humble walls, decisions of immense consequence were made, governing alliances, military campaigns, and the very lives of millions. The quiet intensity of such a space, where immense power resided without ostentation, is a fascinating thought. A key element of their organizational genius was the decimal principle, a system that extended beyond just the military. Households, and by extension, horsemen, were structured into units of 10, then 100, 1,000, and ultimately the impressive tumen of 10,000. Imagine how this functioned in daily life. Every family knew their place within this structure, their small unit part of a larger whole. Orders from the Chanyu would cascade down through this organized chain of command, moving swiftly from the wise kings to the Tumen commanders, and finally to the individual household leaders. This system possessed a dual military, domestic capacity, meaning martial grades were coupled with social ranks. Your standing in the army directly correlated with your social standing in the community. This integrated system allowed for the rapid mobilization of both military forces and vital economic resources, like horses and provisions, essential for sustaining such a vast, mobile empire. The quiet discipline underlying this structure, the shared understanding of roles and responsibilities, must have been profound. This burgeoning bureaucracy, though not built on endless reams of paper and ink, operated through a reliance on highly trusted messengers, verbal commands, and the deep cultural emphasis on memory and loyalty. Wages, not always in coin, but in the valuable form of goods, animals, or provisions, were paid to top military commanders and state functionaries directly from the Chanyu's political center. This directly challenges the idea of them being a simple confederacy, showing a formalized system of reward and administration beyond purely kin based ties. While their government remained, in many ways, a family affair, with power concentrated in the royal house and a few select clans, it was clearly a hybrid system, blending traditional nomadic kinship with emerging, organized state structures. Beyond the grand politics, what was life like for an ordinary Xiongnu person? Society was a tapestry woven from practical necessity and ancient traditions. Women played crucial roles in managing the herds, preparing food, raising children, and maintaining the yurts, the constant need for repair on felt, ropes, and wooden frames, a persistent, tactile. Children learned to ride almost as soon as they could walk, their small hands feeling the rough texture of a pony's coat, the wind whipping through their hair as they clung to its mane, their days filled with helping with animals, gathering fuel, and absorbing the oral traditions of their people around the crackling fire, the feeling of rough wool against the skin, the persistent chill in the air, even indoors, and the ever present smell of smoke and animal musk were constants. Hygiene, by modern standards, was rudimentary. The persistent smells mentioned earlier, a concoction of damp wool, stale animal fats, and human presence, clung to clothing and skin, a constant, inescapable presence. There was no running water for regular bathing, just what could be carried or found. Medical knowledge was basic, relying on herbal remedies and traditional practices, often with uncertain results. The pervasive feeling of grime, the lingering aches from constant physical exertion, and the ever present threat of illness from close proximity to animals and limited sanitation were simply facts of life. Now, let's return to that persistent scholarly question. Did the Xiongnu truly constitute an empire? Some scholars, like Nikolay Cradin, apply very strict criteria, looking for things like merit based selection for officials, regular taxation, and distinct judicial powers, and conclude the Xiongnu were at best embryonic in their statehood. This is a quiet, academic puzzle where the very definition of a state is debated with careful precision. But then, other voices, like Lawrence Crater and Nicola di Cosmo, offer a more flexible view, arguing that applying overly modern or sedentary criteria might misinterpret ancient nomadic polities. The Xiongnu, they suggest, were much more similar to a well organized state. And this is where the quiet revelations of archaeology provide crucial insights. The imperial blueprint, structures and society of the Xiongnu, at the very apex of this sprawling Xiongnu entity, sat the Chanyu, the supreme chieftain. His authority was immense, extending over countless tribes scattered across the vast inner Asian landscape. Yet, unlike the grand, unmoving capitals of sedentary empires, the Chanyu's court was mobile, the heart of the empire residing within a large, central yurt. Imagine stepping inside this pivotal dwelling, the air thick with the scent of felt, smoke from the central hearth, perhaps the lingering aroma of dried meat and herbal infusions. The furnishings would be simple, utilitarian, thick felt rugs on the ground, low wooden tables, storage chests of cured leather. Yet, within these humble walls, decisions of immense consequence were made, governing alliances, military campaigns, and the very lives of millions. The quiet intensity of such a space, where immense power resided without ostentation, is a fascinating thought. Beneath the Chayu, the Xiongnu displayed a surprisingly complex hierarchy, moving beyond a simple tribal chiefdom. There were left and right wise kings, typically close relatives of the Chayu, who oversaw vast sections of the empire. These were not just figureheads, they were administrators, military commanders, and conduits of the Chayu's will across immense distances. while Chinese historians, with their inherent bias towards their own highly centralized bureaucratic systems, often oversimplified the Xiongnu's internal workings. Their own records do mention these lesser kings, hinting at a multi tiered organization far more sophisticated than a mere collection of loosely allied tribes. A key element of their organizational genius was the decimal principle, a system that extended beyond just the military. Households, and by extension, horsemen, were structured into units of 10, then 100, 1,000, and ultimately the impressive tumen of 10,000. Imagine how this functioned in daily life. Every family knew their place within this structure, their small unit part of a larger whole. Orders from the Chanyu would cascade down through this organized chain of command, moving swiftly from the wise kings to the Tumen commanders, and finally to the individual household leaders. This system possessed a dual military, domestic capacity, meaning martial grades were coupled with social ranks. Your standing in the army directly correlated with your social standing in the community. This integrated system allowed for the rapid mobilization of both military forces and vital economic resources, like horses and provisions, essential for sustaining such a vast, mobile empire. The quiet discipline underlying this structure, the shared understanding of roles and responsibilities, must have been profound. This burgeoning bureaucracy, though not built on endless reams of paper and ink, operated through a reliance on highly trusted messengers, verbal commands, and the deep cultural emphasis on memory and loyalty. Wages, not always in coin, but in the valuable form of goods, animals, or provisions, were paid to top military commanders and state functionaries directly from the Chanyu's political center. This directly challenges the idea of them being a simple confederacy, showing a formalized system of reward and administration beyond purely kin based ties. While their government remained, in many ways, a family affair, with power concentrated in the royal house and a few select clans, it was clearly a hybrid system, blending traditional nomadic kinship with emerging, organized state structures. But beyond the grand politics, what was life like for an ordinary Xiongnu person? Society was a tapestry woven from practical necessity and ancient traditions. Women played crucial roles in managing the herds, preparing food, raising children, and maintaining the yurts, the constant need for repair on felt, ropes, and wooden frames, a persistent, tactile. Children learned to ride almost as soon as they could walk, their small hands feeling the rough texture of a pony's coat, the wind whipping through their hair as they clung to its mane, their days filled with helping with animals, gathering fuel, and absorbing the oral traditions of their people around the crackling fire, the feeling of rough wool against the skin, the persistent chill in the air, even indoors, and the ever present smell of smoke and animal musk were constants. Hygiene, by modern standards, was rudimentary. The persistent smells mentioned earlier, a concoction of damp wool, stale animal fats, and human presence, clung to clothing and skin, a constant, inescapable presence. There was no running water for regular bathing, just what could be carried or found. Medical knowledge was basic, relying on herbal remedies and traditional practices, often with uncertain results. The pervasive feeling of grime, the lingering aches from constant physical exertion, and the ever present threat of illness from close proximity to animals and limited sanitation were simply facts of life. Now, let's return to that persistent scholarly question. Did the Xiongnu truly constitute an empire? Some scholars, like Nikolay Cradin, apply very strict criteria, looking for things like merit-based selection for officials, regular taxation, and distinct judicial powers, and conclude the Xiongnu were at best embryonic in their statehood. This is a quiet, academic puzzle where the very definition of a state is debated with careful precision. But then, other voices, like Lawrence Crater and Nicola di Cosmo, offer a more flexible view, arguing that applying overly modern or sedentary criteria might misinterpret ancient nomadic polities. The Xiongnu, they suggest, were much more similar to a well organized state. And this is where the quiet revelations of archaeology provide crucial insights. Archaeological evidence definitively shows that the Xiongnu were not nomads who wandered about without a clear sense of belonging to a fixed territory. Instead, they were a highly complex empire that encompassed vast territories and varied regions. This is a key detail because the word nomad often conjures images of aimless wandering. Yet the Xiongnu controlled immense, defined territories. They integrated virtually every ethnic and linguistic group in Inner Asia, from Mongolic speaking Donghu to Indo European speaking Yuezhi, into their domain. This inherent diversity is a hallmark of an empire, implying a sophisticated political structure capable of integrating and governing disparate groups over a vast geographical area. Furthermore, the archaeological findings support the textual hints that the Xiongnu administration had distinct military and civilian apparatuses separate from kin based hierarchies. The fact that wages in various forms were paid to top military commanders and state functionaries from a political center headed by the Xiongnu Chenyu directly challenges Cradian's strict criteria. It shows a formalized system of governance that, while different from Han China's, was certainly a step beyond a simple chiefdom. The Xiongnu, in their unique way, demonstrate that statehood is not a simple yes or no condition, but a fascinating continuum of political complexity, adapting to their unique environment and way of life. They built an empire not of static stone, but of moving power, a testament to their quiet, enduring ingenuity. Daily echoes of the steppe, the unglamorous realities. Let's now turn our gentle gaze to the unglamorous, yet profoundly immersive, daily realities of life within the Xiongnu Empire. This wasn't a world of grand banquets and lavish palaces for most, but a persistent, tactile existence deeply connected to the land and its rhythms. Every moment a quiet testament to their enduring resilience. Their homes, the yurts or juries as they're often known today, were ingenious marvels of practicality, perfectly suited for a life of constant movement. Imagine entering one. The circular space immediately feels protective, a warm cocoon against the vastness outside. The air inside carried a complex, earthy aroma, the deep, lanolin rich scent of the thick felt walls, which were made from pounded sheep's wool, layered to ward off the steppe's harsh elements. This mingled with the pervasive smell of wood smoke from the central hearth, a gentle perfume that clung to clothing and hair, and the subtle, unavoidable scent of dried animal dung, their primary fuel source. On a cold morning, you might feel the faint dampness in the air, condensation collecting on the inside of the felt roof, sometimes even dripping gently if the night had been particularly frigid. The sounds within the yurt were intimately tied to the outside world. The relentless steppe wind, that constant companion, would howl and buffet against the taut felt walls, creating a low, rhythmic drumming sound that could be both comforting and subtly unsettling. You'd hear the quiet creak of the wooden lattice frame, almost a sighing sound, as the yurt flexed with the gusts. Inside, the small noises of daily life were magnified. The crackle and pop of the dung fire, the soft rustle of furs as someone shifted in their sleep, the gentle clinking of a metal pot being placed over the flames, and beneath it all, a persistent, almost imperceptible vibration from the hard earth floor, reminding you that you were always, truly, on the ground. Meals were a testament to efficiency and resourcefulness. The Xiongnu diet relied heavily on the bounty of their herds, meat and dairy. Imagine the simple act of preparing a meal: tough, sinewy meat, perhaps mutton or horse, being slowly boiled in a large iron cauldron over the central, smoky fire. Reels boiled in a large iron cauldron over the central, smoky fire. You taste the gamey flavor of the meat, its texture requiring persistent chewing, followed by the warmth of the broth, perhaps seasoned only with wild herbs if they were lucky enough to forage some. Fermented mare's milk, or kumis, was a daily staple, its sharp, tangy taste a familiar presence on the tongue, slightly alcoholic, yet surprisingly refreshing. There were few fresh vegetables or fruits for much of the year, meaning a constant, subtle yearning for something crisp and sweet, a longing that was rarely sated. The preparation was rudimentary, focused on efficiency and preservation, ensuring survival rather than culinary delight. The constant gnawing of hunger was a familiar feeling, as were the deep pangs of thirst, for water was a precious commodity sought out at rivers, springs, or melted snow. The taste of water varied wildly, from the clear crispness of a mountain stream to the slightly alkaline taste of a steppe well. Every drop was valued, every sip a conscious act. The lack of easy access to diverse foods meant a constant, subtle yearning for fresh, sweet tastes, something vibrant and green, a luxury rarely afforded. Meals were often consumed quickly, in a quiet, focused manner. The only sounds the rustle of clothing and the soft, repetitive sounds of immediate warmth from a hot meal was a brief comfort, quickly fading as the steppe's pervasive chill began to creep back in. Hygiene was a continuous challenge in a nomadic, mobile existence. There was no regular bathing in warm, flowing water. Instead, cleaning involved dry brushing of clothing, rubbing down bodies with animal fat or sand, or making the most of infrequent opportunities at rivers. The pervasive smells of animal musk, smoke, stale sweat, and unwashed wool clung to clothing and skin, a constant, inescapable presence. You'd feel the persistent grime on your skin, a fine layer of dust and dirt that never seemed to fully disappear. Primitive medicine, based on herbs and ancestral knowledge, offered limited solutions for common ailments, meaning that sickness, from simple colds to more serious infections, was a constant, terrifying threat, often leading to quite irreversible suffering. Life was a perpetual journey, the rhythm of travel ingrained in their very being. Days were spent on horseback, the rhythmic sway beneath you, the soft, muffled thud of countless hooves on the dry earth. Your body would learn the gentle rocking motion, adapting to the subtle shifts of the horse's gait. The wind, that constant companion, would bite at your face, carrying fine dust that coated your eyelids and seeped into your lungs, making your breath feel gritty. The creak of leather saddles and the groaning of heavily laden wagons would form a background melody to the vast, empty silence of the steppe. Hour after hour, day after day, the horizon would relentlessly stretch before you, seemingly unchanging, yet always beckoning you onward. The physical weariness was a deep, bone aching sensation, a quiet fatigue that settled into your very core, a testament to the sheer effort of simply moving through their world. Even the simple act of sleeping was a different experience. You'd lie on thin bedding, perhaps a few layers of felt or animal furs, feeling the persistent coolness of the earth beneath you. The sounds of the night, the distant cries of nocturnal animals, the continuous whisper or howl of the wind, the soft snorting of nearby horses would filter through the thin felt walls. Awakening in the morning, your body would often feel stiff, perhaps a dull ache in your joints from the previous day's ride or the cold night air. The act of rising was slow, deliberate, into the crisp, often freezing, air of the early steppe morning. Childhood, too, was deeply intertwined with these realities. A younger child would learn to ride almost as soon as they could walk, their small hands feeling the rough texture of a pony's coat, the wind whipping through their hair as they clung to its mane. Their games involved simple toys fashioned from bone or wood, mimicking the herding and hunting activities of their elders, the constant presence of animals, the sounds of their herds, the smells of their pens were their earliest sensory memories. But at night, inside the yurt, there was a sense of quiet security, listening to the stories of ancestors and heroes whispered around the flickering fire, learning the oral traditions that bound their people together. This was a life where modern conveniences simply did not exist. Every single aspect of existence required deliberate, manual effort. No taps for running water, no instant warmth, no quick solutions to problems. The constant grind of herding, riding, breaking camp, and setting up camp again forged a quiet, unwavering resilience. It was in these unassuming, often uncomfortable, daily echoes of the steppe that the true strength of the Xiongnu lay, a profound capacity for perseverance that allowed their empire, mobile and seemingly fleeting, to endure for centuries. And the dragon and the horse, Sangyo Han relations and their impact. Let us now turn our attention to the sprawling, complex dance between two ancient giants, the mobile, formidable Xiongnu Empire and the settled, bureaucratic Han dynasty of China. Their relationship was never simple, a constantly shifting tapestry woven from threads of intense hostility, pragmatic trade, surprising diplomacy, and even strategic intermarriage. Initially, from the perspective of the Han, the Xiongnu were seen as barbarians, a common term used for any non Chinese people, implying a lack of civilization and refinement. There were the unruly peoples to the north, a persistent nuisance whose raids disturbed the peace of the frontier. But soon, particularly after Modu's consolidation of power, the Han began to grasp this was no mere collection of tribes. This was a cohesive, disciplined force, a true rival on the geopolitical stage, a reality that must have settled deep in the hearts of Han strategists like a cold stone. In the earlier phases of their interaction, before the more aggressive stance of later Han emperors, a policy known as Hikin was adopted. This was peace through marriage, diplomacy, a pragmatic strategy to mitigate the frequent and costly Xiongnu raids along the Han frontier. Imagine a young Han princess, raised amidst the comforts of a grand palace, Perhaps the intricate smells of incense and polished wood, the constant low hum of servants and scholars. Suddenly, she is sent on an arduous journey westward, her sedan chair swaying with the rhythm of the road, the familiar sense of her home gradually replaced by the dry, dusty smell of the frontier, the pervasive scent of horse and unfamiliar lands. She would arrive in a world utterly alien, no towering city walls, but vast, open plains, her new palace, a large felt yurt, smelling of smoke and animal hides. This was a stark, almost jarring contrast to her previous life, a quiet sacrifice for imperial peace. Under this Hikin policy, the Han also paid annual gifts, not called tribute by Han, but in effect, they were in significant quantities of gold, fine silk, flour, rice, and wine would be sent northward. From the Xingui perspective, this wasn't charity, it was the due payment from a less powerful neighbor, a validation of their strength. For almost 2 centuries, the Xingui effectively compelled the Chinese to pay them, a quiet testament to their military and political leverage. However, this relatively peaceful coexistence was destined to change. With the ascension of Emperor Wudi, a powerful and ambitious ruler, the Han's patience wore the persistence Qin's Wetherigese, despite the treaties, led Wudi to a stark conclusion. Full-scale war was necessary. The Han also sought to strategically dominate the northern regions by controlling the trading outlets and ensuring that the peoples either side of the lines were kept apart, a quiet, insidious strategy to weaken the Shin's economically and politically. Let's briefly touch upon some of the major conflicts, not as grand sagas, but as moments of grinding logistical difficulty and human discomfort. The battle in Pingsheng 2000 BCE was an early, harsh lesson for the Han. Emperor Gaozu, the founder of the Han dynasty, found his forces completely besieged by Modu Chanyu's Xingu army. Imagine the feeling of being trapped in a cold mountain pass, surrounded by an enemy that moved with terrifying speed and agility. The subtle chill of fear would mingle with the biting cold of the mountains, the constant anxiety of a dwindling supply chain, the smell of unwashed bodies, desperate cooking fires, and the pervasive scent of winter air would hang heavy in the camp. It was a stark, humiliating outcome for Han, necessitating a difficult rescue and directly leading to the initiation of the Hikin policy and annual payments from Han to the Xiongnu, a clear sign of Xiongnu dominance at that time. Later, the battle in Mai, 1313 BCE, saw a sophisticated hand trap designed to lure and ambush Junshin Chenyu deep within Han territory. Picture the quiet tension of the Han forces, hidden, waiting for their prey. The subtle rustle of their silk banners in the wind, the muffled sounds of men holding their breath. But the Xiongnu leader, with an uncanny intuition, discovered the plots. The immediate, silent withdrawal of the Xiongnu cavalry, melting back into the vastness of the steppe, must have been a crushing disappointment for the waiting Han, leaving only the faint scent of dust and the bitter taste of a missed opportunity. Then came the immense battle in Yanran Mountain, 90 BCE, a truly massive Han offensive involving 130,000 troops. Imagine the sheer logistical nightmare of moving such a colossal army across vast distances, the constant sounds of thousands of marching feet, the creak of supply wagons, the endless murmuring of countless men and animals. The exhaustion would be bone deep, a persistent ache in every muscle, days blending into weeks of relentless movement. Despite initial successes, the Xiongnu skillfully encircled the exhausted Han forces. The feeling of being trapped in a vast, empty landscape, with the biting wind as your only companion, must have been demoralizing. The quiet, grim reality of ancient warfare, the cold steel, the pain, the dust, the omnipresent scent of fear and impending death settled heavily upon them. This significant Han setback forced Emperor Wu to cease large scale military actions, largely due to a severe recession in the Han economy and widespread public war wariness. Even nature played a role, as seen in the battle in Wusun, 73 to 71 BCE. Xiongnu aggression against the Wusun city-state prompted a joint Han-Wusun campaign. A retaliatory Xiongnu attack on Wusun was catastrophically affected by severe weather, leading to the loss of over 90% of their cavalry. Imagine the biting sting of cold, the blinding snow, the numb feeling in your fingers and toes as a blizzard descended upon an unprepared, the subtle crunch of snow underfoot, the muffled sounds of distress, the overwhelming, indifferent power of nature, proving to be a more formidable foe than any human army. This environmental calamity, combined with renewed attacks from other tribes, forced the Xiongnu to withdraw from the western regions, granting the Han absolute control over the crucial Silk Road. This brings us to a crucial, yet often overlooked, aspect of their interaction: economic dependency. The Xiongnu's ability to maintain authority over their subject peoples was heavily reliant on their relationship with China and access to its wealth. Fine Chinese silks, grains, and crafted goods were not just luxuries, they were vital tools for the Xiongnu Yu to dispense as largesse to his chieftains and warriors, cementing their loyalty. Imagine the feeling of a prized piece of Han silk, soft and smooth against the rough, worn wool of nomadic clothing, a tangible symbol of imperial connection. The Han strategically recognized this dependency. Their shift from paying tribute to aggressively restricting trade and controlling access to Chinese goods was a powerful weapon. By cutting off the flow of these vital resources, the Han could severely undermine the Xiongnu's economic base, creating internal tensions and subtle grumbling within the Xiongnu ranks when the promised silks or grains failed to arrive. This dynamic illustrates how economic leverage, patiently applied, could be as devastating as any military campaign, ultimately contributing to the internal political instability that would later afflict the Xiongnu Empire. The complex ballet of give and take, of warfare and diplomacy between the dragon and the horse, profoundly shaped the destinies of both powers, leaving a legacy of intertwined history stretching across centuries. The long sunset, decline, fragmentation, and enduring legacy. Even the mightiest of empires, whether built of stone or fleeting movement, eventually face their sunset. For the Xiongnu Empire, this decline was not a sudden, dramatic collapse, but a slow, gradual unraveling driven by a complex interplay of internal vulnerabilities and relentless external pressure. The primary internal weakness, a quiet, insidious force, was political instability arising from protracted struggles over the imperial succession. Imagine the hushed whispers of dissent among powerful chieftains, the subtle shifts in loyalty, the cold calculations as contenders vied for the Chanyu's mantle. Each dispute, each internal conflict chipped away at the empire's cohesion, like slow erosion by the relentless steppe wind. Adding to this internal strain was the ever growing shadow of increasing Chinese dominance and internal tensions. A Han dynasty, learning from their early defeats, pursued deliberate policies aimed at controlling trade outlets and preventing the consolidation of steppe peoples. This wasn't always through open warfare. Sometimes it was a more subtle, economic warfare. Imagine the quiet grumbling among the Xiongnu tribes when the promised silks or valuable grains from China became scarce, when the flow of wealth, crucial for the Chinese to maintain loyalty, was deliberately curtailed. The feeling of resources dwindling, the subtle scent of deprivation, could foster disunity more effectively than any direct military assault. By approximately 60 BCE, the Xiongnu had already lost control of the crucial Silk Road to the Han, a quiet, significant blow to their economic lifeblood. In the middle of the first century CE, under the weight of these accumulating pressures, the Xiongnu state irrevocably splintered into two distinct halves, the northern Xiongnu and the southern Xiongnu. This major fragmentation must have been a profoundly painful experience, a division that tore at the very fabric of their identity. Imagine a family, once united, now separated by diverging interests and allegiances, their paths quietly diverging across the vast steppe. The, the fate of these two halves differed significantly. The southern Xiongnu eventually found themselves subjugated by the Han dynasty, becoming a buffer state against their independent northern counterpart. Their imperial identity slowly faded, absorbed into the Han sphere of influence. Yet, in a fascinating twist of history, remnants of the southern Shingo later played a significant role in conquering northern China in the early 4th century CE, a quiet echo of their former power, returning. The northern Shingo managed to maintain their independence for roughly another century after the split, but were ultimately defeated by the Mongolic-speaking Xingbei. Following this defeat, remnants of the northern Shingo migrated westward towards the Aral Sea. This was a dispersal, a slow fading away into the vastness of Eurasia, their presence becoming more diffuse, their distinct identity dissolving over time. The small number of Xingu tribe who had settled along the Chinese border continued to appear in Chinese historical sources until as late as the 5th century CE, a final, lingering whisper of a once mighty name. Despite their eventual decline and fragmentation, the Xiongnu Empire holds a truly pivotal place in history. They are widely recognized as the first of the great nomad empires on the Eurasian steppe, and a prototype of others, including the Mongols. Their innovative military and administrative techniques, especially the ingenious decimal system, units of 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000, were not for care. They were adopted and adapted by countless other Central Asian tribes and later conquests, demonstrating a profound and lasting influence on steppe statecraft for centuries to come. It's a quiet testament to their strategic brilliance, how their organizational concepts rippled through time. Now, a final, persistent question often arises in the quiet halls of scholarship. What about the Huns? Is there a direct connection between the Xiongnu of Inner Asia and the Huns who emerged in Western Eurasia centuries later, striking fear into the heart of the Roman Empire? While this theory was once widely accepted, it now has only limited support in modern scholarship. The names might sound similar, a faint etymological echo across vast distances, but this linguistic similarity doesn't definitively guarantee any direct political, cultural, or ethnic continuity. It's a fascinating, unresolved discussion, a quiet puzzle for historians and archaeologists, reminding us that continuity in ancient history is rarely a simple, linear path, but often a complex tapestry of cultural transmission, political reformation, and the quiet adoption of new identities. The Xiongnu, themselves a multi ethnic empire, likely dispersed into many peoples, their story becoming part of a much larger, intricate human journey across the vast Eurasian landmass. A gentle good night from the steppe. As the quiet of the night deepens and the distant echoes of the ancient world begin to softly fade, we can now gently answer the question that guided our journey. Did the Xiongnu Empire truly, as the winds still whisper across the vast ancient steppe, carrying the faint, lingering echoes of horse hooves and distant voices, the evidence gathered from both meticulous historical texts and the quiet revelations of archaeological digs, points to a resounding, definitive yes. They were far more than a simple tribal confederacy or a loose collection of nomadic wanderers. Uriagondo demonstrated key characteristics that truly define an empire, a vast territorial control that stretched across diverse regions, from Manchuria to the Aral Sea, from the Baikal forests to the Chinese frontier. Within this immense domain resided a multi ethnic, polyglot population, all held together by a centralized leadership under the powerful Chanyu. We saw how their political hierarchy, with its lesser kings and developing administrative apparatuses distinct from pure kinship ties, hinted at a sophistication often overlooked by their sedentary neighbors. Their highly organized and effective military, particularly the ingenious decimal system, was a testament to their quiet, enduring strategic brilliance. And perhaps most compellingly, the Xiongnu cultivate a diversified agro-pastoralist economy, sustained not only by their mobile pastoralism, but also by settled, fortified agricultural centers. This was a deliberate choice, a pragmatic adaptation that allowed them to transcend the limitations of pure nomadism and sustain a large, complex empire. They embraced a hybrid model of survival and power, far removed from the simplistic nomadic barbarian stereotype. The scent of chimney soot, damp felt, and cooking meat within their yurt, the subtle sounds of wind howling against their walls, and the constant feeling of dust and wind on their skin were not just facts of their daily lives, but the very fabric of their imperial existence, built on quiet endurance and deep ingenuity. Their complex and often challenging interactions with the Han Dynasty, oscillating between strategic marriage diplomacy, forced tribute payments, and large scale warfare, further underscored their formidable status. They were a power that the mighty Han could not ignore, a rival to be contended with on equal, if often adversarial, terms. The Xionghu's eventual decline and fragmentation were not a sign of their non existence, but a quiet testament to the intricate dynamics that shaped the lifespan of all steppe empires, a recurring pattern of internal struggles amplified by external pressures. Their enduring legacy as the prototype for subsequent nomadic empires across the Eurasian steppe is undeniable. The military organization and statecraft they pioneered influenced generations of later steppe polities, from the Turkic Khaganates to the vast Mongol Empire. Their story quietly reminds us that history is rarely a simple, neat narrative, but a rich tapestry of adaptations, struggles, and profound innovations. So, as you allow your thoughts to drift, let the quiet perseverance of the Shangnu settle gently in your mind. Their empire, built on the very breath of the wind and the rhythm of hooves, stands as a powerful reminder that history's grandest stories can sometimes be found in the most seemingly mundane details, and that even what sounds boring can hold a captivating depth. May your own dreams be as vast and as quiet as the ancient steppe itself, and may you drift off now, knowing a little more about a truly remarkable, if often overlooked, chapter in our shared human story. Sweet dreams, and thank you for joining us on this peaceful historical journey.